Ever pondered the origins of countries, those invisible lines dividing the world? It's a fascinating tale, one that takes us back many centuries, to a time when the world as we know it was a very different place. Let's start by talking about nation-states. This term may sound like a mouthful, but it simply refers to a sovereign state whose citizens are united by factors such as language, culture, or ethnicity. Today, we take the existence of such nation-states for granted, but there was a time when this concept was as alien as, well, aliens. So what was the world like before the birth of nation-states? Picture a world ruled by tribal leaders and monarchs where territories were defined by natural boundaries like rivers, mountains, or forests, rather than neatly drawn lines on a map. Societies were smaller, more localized, and governance was often based on kinship or conquest. But as societies grew and became more complex, so did the need for a more structured form of governance. The idea of a centralized authority, ruling over a defined territory and its inhabitants, began to gain traction. This led to the emergence of city-states, kingdoms, and empires, precursors to the modern nation-states. In many ways, the formation of nation-states was a response to this increasing complexity. It was an attempt to unite diverse groups under a single banner, to create a sense of shared identity and purpose. It was also a way to establish clear boundaries and rules, to prevent conflicts and ensure stability. But the birth of nation-states wasn't a smooth process, far from it. There were disagreements, conflicts, even wars. Not everyone was on board with this new form of governance. It was a sea change, a paradigm shift, and like all such shifts, it was met with resistance. Yet, despite the challenges, the concept of nation-states continued to evolve and spread. From tribal territories to the birth of nation-states, the world map began to take shape. And as it did, the story of our world became a little more complex, a little more fascinating. So, who were the pioneers in this game of invisible lines? Well, this story takes us back, way back, to the cradle of civilization. Picture this: vast stretches of land, untamed wilderness, and then, the first glimmers of human settlement. First on our list is Egypt, the land of pharaohs and pyramids. As far back as 3000 BC, Egypt was already an organized state, with borders defined by natural barriers. The Mediterranean Sea to the north, the inhospitable Sahara to the west, and the Red Sea to the east. Governance? That was under the all-powerful pharaoh, a ruler considered a living god. Talk about a job with perks. Next up we have Iran, known in the ancient times as Persia. By the 6th century BC, the Achaemenid Empire, the first Persian empire, had emerged. Unlike Egypt, Persia's borders were not defined by natural barriers, but were the result of military conquest and diplomacy. The King of Kings, as the Persian ruler was known, managed a vast empire through a system of provinces, each with its own local governor. Then there's China. The Middle Kingdom, as China calls itself, boasts one of the most continuous and ancient civilizations. The first unified Chinese state was established in the 3rd century BC under the Qin dynasty. Like Persia, China's borders expanded and contracted through wars and treaties. The emperor, considered the son of heaven, ruled with a mandate from the divine. These early states, these pioneers, didn't just draw lines on a map, they established systems of governance, they built cities, they waged wars, and they made peace. They set the blueprint for what we now know as countries, and this was just the beginning. From these early civilizations, the concept of a country began to take shape, to evolve, and to spread across the world. Those were the first steps in the long journey of forming countries. Fast forward a few centuries to the Middle Ages, the world started looking a bit more familiar. The Middle Ages, stretching from the 5th to the 15th century, marked a period of significant change in the political landscape. From the ashes of the Roman Empire, new political structures arose. Kingdoms, fiefdoms, and empires took shape, defining territories and establishing borders. The Renaissance, a period of cultural, artistic, and political rebirth, followed the Middle Ages. It further pushed the transformation of political structures, with the concept of nation-states gradually emerging. The nation-state, a sovereign entity defined by its geographic boundaries and a centralized government, became the cornerstone of modern geopolitics. One event stands out as a turning point in this journey: the Treaty of Westphalia in the 17th century. The treaty ended the devastating 30 Years' War in Europe, but its influence reached far beyond the cessation of hostilities. It marked the beginning of the modern system of nation-states. The Westphalian system, as it's commonly known, is based on the principle of territorial sovereignty. It means each nation-state has exclusive authority within its borders, free from external interference. This concept might seem obvious to us today, but it was revolutionary at the time. It changed not just the map of Europe, but the entire world. But let's not romanticize the past. The creation of countries wasn't a walk in the park. It was often marked by conflict, disagreement, and power struggles. Not everyone accepted these new forms of power willingly. Kings, queens, and emperors didn't just draw borders on a map and call it a day. They had to fight for control, negotiate treaties, and sometimes wage wars. Who decided how to divide the world in countries? Well, it was usually the ones with the most power, whether through military strength, wealth, or diplomatic prowess. The powerful set the rules, and the rest had to follow or challenge them. With the stroke of a quill, world leaders set the stage for the world as we know it today. As explorers set sail to unknown lands, the world map was about to get a major makeover. This period we're diving into now is known as the Era of Colonization. It was during the 15th to the 20th centuries when the world truly started to take the shape we recognize today. European powers, Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and the Netherlands, led the charge, their ships crisscrossing the globe, driven by a thirst for resources, wealth, and power. These colonizers ventured into uncharted territories, setting foot on far-off shores and claiming lands as their own. They were not merely explorers, they were architects of a new world order. Their modus operandi? A potent mix of trade, conquest, and settlement. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As these powers colonized far-flung lands, they often clashed with each other. They carved up the world like a giant cake, each wanting the largest slice. This led to drawn-out conflicts and treaties, which ultimately decided the boundaries of new colonies and, by extension, future countries. The colonizers imposed their culture, language, and systems of governance on the colonized peoples, forever changing their way of life. Some colonies eventually gained independence and became countries in their own right. Some, through a process of decolonization, were handed back to their original inhabitants. Each new country was a piece of the puzzle, contributing to the world map as we know it. But, and this is crucial, the legacy of colonization is not just about borders on a map. It's a complex tapestry woven from threads of cultural exchange, conflict, oppression, and resistance. It's a story of power dynamics, of dominance and subjugation, that continues to shape our world today. Let's not forget, the impact of this era was massive. It's not just about the birth of new countries, but also about the transformation of societies, economies, and cultures across the globe. This era was a game changer, adding new players to the map and redrawing many lines. Fast forward again to the present day, and we find ourselves in a world divided into almost 200 countries. It's a complex tapestry woven over centuries of power struggles, political maneuvering, and human aspiration. The map as we know it today has been shaped significantly by the process of decolonization that followed the Second World War. Empires crumbled, and new nations emerged from the ashes. Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, these regions saw the birth of dozens of new countries in the mid-20th century. Each one has its own unique story of liberation, struggle, and identity. Wars, too, have played their part. Boundaries have been drawn and redrawn in the aftermath of conflict. Take a look at Europe post World War II, for instance. The borders shifted dramatically as the Iron Curtain descended and countries were carved out of the ruins. The fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s further reshaped the region, leading to the creation of 15 independent countries. Political shifts have likewise contributed to the ever-evolving world map. The collapse of Yugoslavia in the 90s, for example, resulted in the formation of 7 new countries in the Balkans. Even in the 21st century, the map continues to change. Take South Sudan, the world's youngest nation. It gained independence from Sudan in 2011 after decades of civil war. And who knows? There may be new countries on the horizon as regions around the world continue to grapple with questions of identity, autonomy, and self-determination. It's a fascinating, ever-changing world we live in. The lines on the map are more than just divisions. They are a testament to our shared history. They tell stories of conquest and surrender, of ambition and revolution, of dreams and struggles. So the next time you look at a world map, remember the centuries of history that have gone into creating those invisible lines.